All right, so today is a fun one. We're going over arguably the last step of a low back rebuild, the QL. And so let's first break down what I'm gonna go through with this video. I'm starting to be a sniper about my videos and follow a format because I realize I'm a ranter and my passion exceeds the conciseness of the message. So we're just gonna go through it. First, I'm gonna break down why this is the missing link. Two, we're gonna talk about what the problem is of how we currently train the QL. I see a lot of people go wrong with good intentions and hurt themselves. Three, we're gonna break down the route of what you should actually do. And four, I'm gonna give you my, as always, hopeful, heartfelt message just because this is my channel, I do what I want. So you guys are gonna hear some love from me. So first, let's go to the missing link, the QL. Let's talk about what it is. It's a muscle that directly connects your hip to your spine. It is very much responsible for lateral pulling on the spine. If you see an anatomy picture of it, it doesn't just go in one muscle attachment to the spine, it actually has four. And so it goes from the iliac crest and then it attaches to different bony parts of the spine. So from the L5-S1 to the L4-L5, L3-L4, it pulls laterally on the spine, and that is an obvious thing we need to balance out left to right. Okay, so let's talk about how it deviates. Could you pass me that right there? My God, thank you so much. Okay. So when I was 17, I wanted to be a pro soccer player, and I started playing when I was 14, so super delusional. But I was practicing every single day, free kicks, thousands on my right leg, swinging my whole leg through, and then maybe, on a great day, 1/10 of the reps on my left side. So I'm getting thousands of swings from my trunk and hips and core and back, swinging through in this direction, and then 1/10 of the reps there. If I did thousands of bicep curls one year on the right, and then hundreds on the left, you would expect a discrepancy you could see. But these tiny biceps on my arms you could see, but you can't see my QL. It's hidden. So I couldn't really see the math equation I was putting against myself. So that's one way it can deviate through sport. Any amount of golf, baseball swing, one direction, you could expect when you reach one side up on a max reach versus the other, you would expect a few inches difference left to right. So you could test that on your own. That's just one aspect of how it deviates. Second, I had a disc herniation in 2019, and the thing about disc herniations, every time you re-injure it, you become more and more avoidant when you just walk, sit, and exist. So after every re-injury I would have, I would start to sit in a chair a little bit more weird and awkward. So instead of being perfectly symmetrical, feeling fine, I would start to bias one cheek in front of the other, and I'd start to turn. And then even more, and even more. Through 2 years of re-injury, I became pretty contorted to where I developed a lateral hip shift. And if you see a picture of what that is, that's when one side of the pelvis is up inches higher than the other. And so that makes it, imagine, you're that deviated up here in the hips and I was still trying to squat. Imagine what my squat looked like. Every movement we start to do starts to be off. And one of the biggest muscular things that we can do about it is the QL. So it can deviate from injury, it can deviate from sports. The last thing I want to say on this, why it's the missing link, it's the last step for building the low back. And I think this segues into part two, which is the problem with current QL training, is we may not really treat it like the last step. I know people who were clients that I've trained, I did it myself. I didn't have the ability to conceptualize back qualities in order of easy, beginner, moderate, advanced. And so the very first basic thing, if you see it in PT, usually they take you from neutral to extension, right? And then you're rebuilding your stabilization and all this other stuff too. That's great. The further steps from that, I've done many videos on it. I like to go for strength from extension, hold, build up to 2 minutes, and then start to regain modest flexion, right? So we know that extension is usually easier after an injury than flexion. But even here, if you're trying to start training a side bend here, but you can't even do a back extension yet. Forward folding, forward bending, you're going way out of order on a tissue level. So just to quickly understand, when you're doing any amount of flexion in the spine, if you go forward, you're using both sides of the musculature, the spine centrally, you're getting the most support from your back to go forward. When you do lateral flexion, it's not just the QL that's getting stretched under load. You're still basically training flexion just with one side of the spine. So you're trying to do something that you can't yet handle two sides at a time, and you're trying to do it proportionally way more load one side at a time. Training the spinal erector, just training the small muscles, the multifidus, QL obviously. So we need to make sure we're going in order. So that's the problem that we get at. We need to train flexion, master that before lateral flexion. I have videos on that and I'll go into it here. And then just also, if you've had a disc injury, just so you can visualize and understand, most disc bulges do not go central in the spine. Mine didn't. Most of the time they're posterior lateral, or they slightly go to one side, the left or right. Now imagine that you may still have some healing to do and you're recovering and you have more of a sensitive side on the spine because of that disc herniation. Remember, the anatomy of the QL, each attachment point to the spine literally goes to the L4, L5, to the bony segments right by the disc herniation. So you could be pulling right by where there's already a sensitivity. Again, forward flexion trains both sides at a time so we get more protection first before we go this way. So that's part of the problem. Now we're at the route, which I think is not a complicated one. It's just a persistent, patient one you have to really work for. So first, we're gonna work standing QLs before we get on the back extension. I would start first with a staggered stance, one foot about a foot in front of the other, shoulder width. I like to have my bottom hand on the front leg and the top hand behind the head. Sliding down and then curl the elbow back. This is gentle enough that you're basically just getting tension and a slight pull, but you don't need to even start with weight if we're not yet ready with our back extension forward reps. So first, getting to 20 reps body weight. Very gentle, working through it first set. Then working the outside of the hip, I think is completely overlooked. You can yank on the QL endlessly. You can forever try to balance out the left to right, but we'll show a picture. Again, the QL goes from the iliac crest to the spine. I'm not the anatomy nerd, but I know it can help understand these concepts if you see this visually. So if that muscle runs from the top of the hip crest to the spine, there's muscles that go directly on the other side of that iliac crest, that bone, that go across the hip. So it's a tug of war. If you are really tight on your outer hips, but you're trying to really balance out left to right your QLs, you're fighting your own anchor. You're fighting your own foundation. So you need to make sure right below, are you evened out left to right on your outer hip? So the first step is 20 reps standing QLs. The second step is training your outer hip mobility to become equal left to right, ideally to an angle of like 15 degrees or less. This one, this brolic bench doesn't have that. So I got flat. So that works too. Trying to get the left to right, very similar. And make sure you're not fighting yourself right below the QL. And then the ultra missing piece of this that I know most people aren't focusing on is the single leg back extension forward. So training one leg at a time, full reps, trying to get your elbows close to the ground, leading with the head all the way up. So flexion, embracing fully decompressing, and then head up, piecing the back together with strength at every segment. So the goal is 20 reps. That's the standard for one leg on each. It is no joke. It requires a healthy spine. Also requires more strength closer to the spine with those little muscles that keep you from tipping side to side. So that's enough insurance once you've worked those 3. 20 reps, even out left to right, couple sets, and then single leg, 20 reps. That, if you can do that with easy recovery 2 times a week and you're not having any issues, then you have the A-OK with your body to start training the QL extension off of the back extension. And this is where you'll really start to become exposed to the difference left to right that you may have. I still have a little bit of one. On this side, I can just about, can just touch. And then on this side, my left, the side I did no practice free kicks on, I can get basically my knuckles to the ground. So I'm still working on it. This was a missing link that I overlooked for a long time. Even when I'm out of pain now, I still have work to do, and I know it affects my squat, it affects my movement. I just think that order of making sure you have basic qualities first before going and combining it. Again, if you saw the rotation video, I broke that down too. That's an ultra combination movement. It's gonna make a huge difference on the outcome of training this. So yeah, training up to this, if you can get 10 reps, even body weight. If someone who's had a bad back, this isn't standards for weightlifters, this is for you to get out of pain. Even 10 reps on each side with a full recovery, next day, no pain, that's huge. I've seen this exercise more than any in my online program cause people flare-ups. So if you can tolerate 10 reps, full range, both sides, you have a healthy back. You were doing pretty good. So that is the route, which brings us to my favorite part of the video, my opinions. So if you got everything you need, you click out. This is the hope section. I just want to make sure my intentions came through in the video. If I spoke slightly incorrectly on anything, if I broke down any anatomy wrong, my honest hope with this was just to give some order and clarity. And my sources really is that I'm someone who was stuck. And full transparency, I was an exercise science student for 3.5 semesters, and I dropped out the year before graduating. And I was pretty much done with the fitness industry. I was not really seeing how. I tried my hand at the academia. I went to sports medicine conferences. I didn't really feel welcomed. I was still super injured. I was an exercise science student going to these conferences and looking at studies and helping perform some on injuries that I still had. I was super injured and couldn't even fix myself. And then in the fitness scene itself, as someone that was a trainer in gyms, I wasn't cool enough, wasn't jacked enough, wasn't shredded enough to get views, so I figured I'm gonna go into filmmaking or try to connect with people elsewhere because I don't know how I can do the fitness scene anymore. So, complete tangent, but the point of it is I kind of fell back into this role through my adversity with injuries, and I'm grateful for it. And so when I speak about my hunches with this stuff, the training philosophies and principles, I didn't create almost any of them, really. I'm just trying to organize as someone who was freshly out of back pain, because there was no low back guy. If there was one, I would have known them. I would have needed them. And I'm just grateful to just lead with experience, because there's a lot of geniuses in training who have incredible theories and principles that work. But if you haven't been in the pain of something, you won't understand that you may try something that should work and it doesn't. And QL is one of those things that I've seen recommended to just dive into it. And a lot of people get hurt and they're not sure why. And I only know because I was a bad back guy and had a lot of injuries with it too. So yeah, just from someone who was also stuck, I hope that this can give you some excitement in the long game, because if you can't quite tolerate it yet, that doesn't mean it's not for you. It means you have other capacities to build. You get to build your single leg back extension. You get to get your actual disc stronger. You actually get the spine stronger, build your back left to right, open up the hips more. You're gonna be a more able-bodied human being and just feel better in a chair, walking around at your job, and in the process get strong QLs once you're ready for it. So, yep, that is the QL episode. I appreciate you guys watching these. I hope that it helps. Any more topics, put in the comments. If you need further help, we got the BBB coaching program. It's an online program. Not trying to go global with it, not trying to do massive signups, just truly making myself available to coach these principles and the same style. As someone who went through it, I'm here to help. Not an expert, just trying to be real. So appreciate y'all. Keep it going.